On a small update, Dave, while we are loading, I added like name tags underneath of the screens. So
Ooh,
me, you,
nice.
as well as John have like a nice name tag underneath of the picture.
Very nice. And you can, yeah, there you go.
Good.
Cool.
Um,
And I see that we're coming up live as well. So John, as I think I've told you, because I feel like I've said it a million times, as we let everyone come in, I generally do a couple of what I call community comments. We actually have a very jam-packed list of community comments. Um, Probably more so than normal. But so everyone, I can see you guys are coming in live. Hey everyone, welcome to the show. Vlad and I have been having some slight troubles getting onto LinkedIn. Probably more so hopefully you're here with us. If you can't catch us on LinkedIn, you can catch us on the Solus PLC YouTube channel, as well as we will have this up for posterity. As always, speaking of YouTube channels, I'm going to pause embarrassing Vlad on the Solus PLC YouTube channel to announce that we now have a Manufacturing Hub YouTube channel. That's where we're going to put all of the edited shows on via video, and that is where we're going to have all those awesome clips that we have been putting up. In regards to that, now it's time to embarrass Vlad, as everyone may know, and everyone watching on Solus PLC, hey everyone, will see Vlad has a fairly successful or very successful YouTube channel called Solus PLC. Now it's please feel free to go ahead and hit the subscribe button. They're currently at 5.6K. The next top is 50, and we're gonna maybe at some point grow both of the channels to enough to get Vlad's silver play buttons. So please feel free to go ahead and do that and give us the likes and kind of all of those other things as we're supposed to ask for semi-professional podcasters on episode 39. In addition to that, so Matt Lee and Adam Gluck from Copia Automation earlier today were announced into the Forbes 30 under 30 list. Adam was on the show, and Copia had sponsored one of our first themes. So we want to congratulate those guys for that awesome accolade. It's kind of cool to know someone who's in the Forbes 30 under 30 for the manufacturing industry. I think the three of us are well past the ability to make it into the 30 under 30. So congratulations. Now, John's going to make 30 under 30 next year, and then he's going to tell you about the 25 years that he spent in Detroit in the next 5 minutes from now. Beyond that, good friend of the show, Frank Lamb, his Mastering the Machine is coming up this Friday. He's going to talk about publishing books. He's authored three books and has a fourth one coming out, and he's done them three different ways. And it's always very interesting to listen to Frank talk about that. So one other awesome announcement. So we have our first giveaway. We're actually going to give away some Siemens software package, Somatic Step 7 professional software license, a Somatic Step 7 safety advanced software license, and a WinCC unified comfort software license. So if you guys want to check that out, it's on manufacturinghub.live/Siemens-giveaway, and we will go ahead and drop the links into all of that below as we get going as well. Yeah, and that's all I have re-community comments. Vlad, do you have anything else before we jump forward?
no, I think it was very thorough. Always appreciate the segment, Dave. Thank you very much.
Absolutely. So everyone, welcome to Manufacturing Hub with me, Dave, and this guy down here, Vlad. We are on episode 39, and we are very pleased to welcome John DeTellem of Siemens and of a little bit of everywhere, as you guys will soon hear when we talk about his background to the show. John, welcome to the show. Thank you for being here.
Hey, thanks. Thanks so much, Dave, and glad for including me in one of these episodes. I really appreciate the opportunity.
No, I think we're going to learn quite a bit from you, John. You've got a wealth of information and knowledge over the couple of decades that you've spent in automation. I don't want to spoil, I guess, the transitions. So I would like for you maybe to start us off with how did you get into manufacturing? What degree did you get, or what path did you take to get started in automation?
Sure. Grew up in Iowa, and I started at a supporting myself through college. So that was a little bit more of a struggle. working and putting my first couple years through. So I did get a AS degree, and then I transferred to the university. But then I realized I needed a better paying job, and I wanted to know what it was to be an engineer. I didn't like the book stuff that I was getting. So I went to what's known as the intern office or the co-op office, and I scored an opportunity in Dwight, Illinois, to be in a manufacturing plant. That was my first experience to that manufacturing plant facility. So I was the little new intern. Co-op was the program. So the objective was a rotating every other semester, come in and be embedded in the plant. But yeah, my first experience, I landed on a new machine, or a retrofitted machine, a machine that was mechanically retrofitted. It was basically dated back to the 50s, a lot of mechanical gearing and stuff, but they put on a PLC 5 and a bunch of local remote IO and wired everything in there and tried to increase the performance of it. And it was one of those situations where corporate engineering came in and did the project, hit the run button, got their run rate out of it and returned. And then the manufacturing, engineering, and maintenance and the production department faced the struggles. So as a new intern, I was landed on the line, take notes, gather information. And the coolest thing is I learned how to get into the PLC and start doing DOS-based programming. If you can date yourself back to when we had DOS-based solutions.
And I mean, at the time, it was cutting edge, right? Like PLC 5 was just being like deployed. You know, for those who are listening, it might not get the reference. That was one of the biggest like revolutions, I guess, in terms of controls at the time.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, legitimately, that 3 months, 4 months, 5 months that I was there for that semester, I saw the PLC go from Series A, Revision A, all the way to Revision M. We just kept updating the firmware chips as identified problems that were with the PLC or issues with the PLC, maintaining it in run mode. But then there was also the whole frustration of the program not necessarily being right. And it was an enlightening experience for me because I really got switched on to what it was to be in industrial automation and to understand what it means to be an automation engineer and embrace the technology. I recognized right away the significance of a PLC over the relay control. Mm-hmm. And like you said, there was a lot of pushback. There was concerns with the stability of the PLC, the performance of the PLC, the acceptance of that as a control system over what they were traditionally familiar with. It was a black box type thing. But I learned so much in that first semester, in those first 3 years, regarding what excites me, what motivates me, and what I find interesting. One of the significant things that I think all of us should recognize is the importance of empowering the production people and the maintenance people to feel like they're a part of the team, and that we're doing some things to try to ensure that they have the capabilities to run the line and be successful, or support and maintain the line and be successful and be able to get it up and running.
Yeah, and I think, you said this in a conversation we had off the stream, but ultimately those people are also looking to do their best job, and they're also invested to maybe a different degree, but to getting the product out the door, right? They're also trying to figure out the better way to, again, reduce downtime, improve production, reduce costs. So I think giving them that ability through automation, which they may not necessarily themselves understand very well, is extremely important, right? As an automation engineer, you're kind of, I want to say, like, they're your customer in a sense, because they're going to be using that equipment.
Absolutely. Yep. 100%. They're your customer. And you got to treat them that way, because they can make it successful or they can make it not successful. And I found that in that first semester and working in that team in the plant, that you've got to get buy-in from them, that this is something that's going to benefit them, and that they are willing to help support you. One of the other things I've learned over time is when they're there to support you, the problems that do come, and they will come, don't get the visibility because you got these guys on your side that cover and protect your back, because you're part of the team, they're part of the team. They're going to help you get through the bad stuff, because we always have bad stuff.
Yeah, no,
Just the
I
fun.
share absolutely the same experience, John. I think that aspect of manufacturing and automation has not changed in the years. But I guess, where did you end up after that internship? I assume you worked at that company for a little bit and then decided to do something
Yeah.
else?
Yeah. So I was extremely enthralled with the Allen Bradley PLC line and programming and getting into the PLC. So I worked through the contacts and the resources that knew me at the plant through Allen Bradley, and I really pushed hard to get part of that new hire for graduation. So as a graduate, I was really seeking Allen Bradley,
Hmm.
but I wasn't part of their normal rounds of colleges and universities where they recruit. So I wasn't on their radar, and but I was told to be aggressive, so I FedExed my resume several times, and I even had
Interesting.
yeah, and it got to the point where the HR manager told me she just decided to ask if the other engineers thought it would be worthwhile to bring me in there because of the fact that compared to the rest of the university students, I actually had some experience. So that was 30 years ago. I don't want to date myself over 30, but 30 years ago, fundamentally, I was graduating from the University of Iowa with an offer to go start in January at the Allen Bradley offices in Detroit, Michigan.
And that's
Well,
I
actually, I
guess, like, go ahead,
started
go
in a
ahead.
training program for 6 months, like you guys. So I started in a training program in Cleveland for about 6 months to actually get trained deeper.
And that's a very interesting, like, perspective. Perhaps we can talk about that, a little bit down the road. But some of the companies have recognized that offering, the 6 months training that's going to be very hands-on. I assume you were kind of, like, I guess, mentored by an older engineer that knew the field for, like, again, for a number of years, and kind of explains to you the ropes, so to speak, is very important. So I think, it's I guess, a good conversation to have about what companies should be doing in order to bring up, I would say, like, green automation engineers up to speed. Because I don't know how your program was at the time, but I always say this on stream. I've never had automation training in my degree, right? Like, this is something that was kind of taught to me afterwards. So I think, maybe there's a certain disconnect between the electrical engineering degree and manufacturing automation per se. But no, not to take away, from your story. How was the experience at Rockwell? And if you could, I guess, bring us up to speed to today, what you're up to these days.
Yeah, absolutely. I will say that you're right. When it comes looking back to my time at the first manufacturing co-op, the one thing that I really appreciate is the manufacturing mechanical engineer that I worked with very closely and the electrical engineers that taught me some perspectives. And then, of course, the fact that Rockwell had that training program to run us through it. And then one thing that I really mentored once I did get to Detroit, 6 months later, I was embedded in automotive. I basically got assigned to automotive projects out of Detroit, worked on it with a team of technical support folks. The cool part is at one point, the previous manufacturer contracted will have me come back and do one more line, which was kind of exciting to get pulled back into that. But yeah, in Detroit, in the automotive stuff, there was so much stuff going on with multiple OEMs delivering to a new plant or for a new product line, a new vehicle. The Dodge truck was one of them. The Chrysler minivan was the second one. But I was basically out there in the field managing the multiple OEMs and trying to ensure some compliance to some standards, some standard wiring concepts, installation guidelines that we provided as a standard for the end user perspective, so that all the OEMs delivered the same solution. And then the other key was just defining some diagnostic standards so that the upper level systems could connect to every machine for factory information systems or automated vehicle identification systems and other solutions. So we were kind of just the liaison between the end user and the OEMs, trying to ensure some consistency so that when lines came into the plant, they all had a similar template and ensured easy integration into the plant, because there was multiple lines coming into these plants. And I did 2 years in Detroit and 2 years in St. Louis. And then that's when I got the opportunity to roll into a European manufacturer that was in South Carolina. And the challenge there was that it was traditionally German automation in that manufacturing facility coming into South Carolina. So the objective there was to travel overseas to Germany and sit down with German OEMs and try to convince them to use the concepts of the PLC5 and the Allen Bradley solutions that existed there. So I did 2 projects implementing automotive standards for those guys out of Europe, and did 2 startups in South Carolina.
I want to, I guess, like expand a few points that you mentioned. So first of all, like again, to put perspective for someone who's maybe not familiar with the automotive industry or listening, from abroad, Detroit is essentially the hub, or I would say right now used to be the hub, but for automotive manufacturing, and a lot of innovation happened in the 90s and 2000s especially, right? So just to kind of put that, maybe it's the Wall Street for finance as like Detroit is for automotive manufacturing. So in case, you need a frame of reference, but also for the OEM that you're mentioning out of Germany, maybe to paint a more explicit picture, a lot of times OEMs standardize on a certain piece of equipment, and in the automation space, they would be reluctant in using anything that they're not familiar with, right? For several reasons, but I think for the most part, it's just the uncertainty / the learning curve, and perhaps maybe again some cultural like approaches. Some cultures would be a lot more cautious on saying, well, like we can use this equipment because we've used some other brand before, so that they would be essentially pushing back, and that's why they had to bring you in to ensure that that process was correct, if I understand right.
Yeah, absolutely correct. Yeah. It was a big change. I mean, fundamentally, the plant in South Carolina was trying to use familiar automation that they knew their workers were going to be familiar with, and hence the Allen Bradley solution. It was a big battle with the manufacturer in Germany when they thought about their global standards and solution. But because it was a one-off plant, they agreed that would be a trial. And in the primary major difference was that we had to have a more completely developed standard of blocks that represented control for a valve or a light curtain or a robot that the programmer put together, and diagnostics were automatically generated, and the solutions were already kind of done, so that there was less variation from one OEM or one programmer to another. That was kind of more of the tighter standards that were done in and accepted for those kinds of manufacturers out of the U.S. So that's what we had to spend. It was a big investment. That way we spent a lot of time. I had a huge team of programmers and guys that helped do the drives, the servos, the HMIs, the networking, and that kind of stuff. But it was exciting. I learned a lot. I got a lot of perspective. Again, when I started on the project embedded in Germany, the interesting perspective was the guys in German were vocalizing the fact that they weren't really bought into their success doing Allen Bradley for this project. But I sat down with the programmers and I kind of walked through the standard that we had developed that we felt matched what they were used to in the Siemens world, with the blocks and tying them together in a sequence. And we got buy-in. The programmers started to speak up and say, hey, we think we can do this. We believe that we can program these machines and cycle them. So we went through the process of doing that. And the unfortunate thing with, at the time, the solution that we were using with Allen Bradley is we did one project with one platform, PLC5s and panel view enhanced or whatever. And then other equipment came in with a different flavor, SLC 500s and panel view 500s, PV 500s or something smaller, which meant a huge cost to develop the standard to fit on that other platform. So it was very frustrating. We had PILT safety PLCs, we had Interbus S IO, we had third-party drives, SEW drives. So it was a hodgepodge of things. The only thing that really stayed consistent was the Allen Bradley old PLC. And then the next project that we rolled into, the PLC5 wasn't going to do it. We migrated to ControlLogix. So
Oh, really? So you
started all
bypassed the SLC 505s? Interesting.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Went straight to ControlLogix. There were some demands from those guys that they wanted to see something that was the future. But that meant we had to redevelop the standard, and the second project was another huge investment, starting from kind of scratch again. And that's when I started to look back at the things that I've been doing as an automation engineer, from pulling from different engineering tool sets to do different product platforms, different networking tools, whether it might have been a device net or a control net or an Interbus S, the safety PLC. And my frustration and my realization is I don't want to use all these different tools. I want to standardize so that I can scale. And once I do have a standard, it lives for the future. I want to reduce the complexity of my architecture so that it's a tighter architecture. And the cool thing is a lot of the German engineers and OEMs took me under and took me to where the Siemens stuff is and started to show me some of the significant things that they were bought into, why they select Siemens for the solutions that they do. So I started to see a little bit of the light, or see a little bit of more of the vision of how Siemens has brought product to market over time versus what my experience was with the previous employer. And like, I think the one thing that you said, I try to explain that is that I feel like some of the Allen Bradley stuff evolved in environments like Detroit, focused on relay to ladder logic, whereas a lot of the Siemens automation evolved from that equipment manufacturer, that really engineer that wants to program it really lean and tight and efficient. Mm-hmm. And that's how the two of them kind of evolved over time. But now we're at the point where the usability's gotten better on the TIA, the totally integrated automation. So you have the ease of use, and you still have that function block programming and that kind of stuff. So yeah, in my career, I got a chance to kind of be it all. And then that's when I made the transition, basically 2005 to 2007. It was a slow transition. Took 2 years. Did a couple other things, but I basically knew that I wanted to do something different after 15 years, 13 years with Rockwell. And I was also more interested in being in South Carolina than going back to the automotive team in Detroit, of course. And then a couple opportunities came up. I did some contracting on my own back to Rockwell and did some project work. And then I was recruited by a Siemens distributor. A former colleague that knew of what my skill sets were, had confidence that I could basically come on board as the Siemens automation specialist for the distributor. And I started on that. So I did that in part of that time period. And then fortunately, how things play out, Rockwell recruited me back. And when I resigned from the distributor, him and my some of the other colleagues that I worked with there said, give us a few days, we'll find an opportunity with you to stay with Siemens. And that's how I got started with Siemens.
Let me ask you, I guess, an interesting question, which I think a lot of engineers will relate to, but transitioning, from Rockwell to Siemens, what was that experience like? And I guess with the maybe caveat, the tools and probably the documentation was not the same as today, but could you still maybe paint us a picture if it was like seamless, if it required, maybe if there were differences, if it, like how long did it take? What are your thoughts around that?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I like the way you phrased it so that I could think about it. I wasn't one that read documentation. I was one that opened up the software and did things. And I kind of got dropped into situations through the distributor to go there and troubleshoot. And some of the things I discovered right away was just the online maintainability. And I think it was my mindset. I opened up Semantic Manager. I opened up the project. I went online. I could see green and reds and oranges. And I started to say, hey, there's some interesting diagnostics that are coming out of the hardware. There's some interesting diagnostics that are coming on the screen. The other thing I found was right mouse click, go to the problem where the IO is, see if something pops up. And I found the usability of the Semantic Manager and the Step 7 tool to monitor and troubleshoot the PLC. I was able to grasp it pretty quick.
Okay.
And then the concept of the HMI tie into the data blocks to get the information from it, it all kind of just resonated with me. And I was like, I get it. The fact that system diagnostics were automatically being generated by the architecture definition and being animated, I found that more exciting. The fact that there was a little bit more done for me in the system so that I felt confident that I could embrace it. And the other thing was just the fact that it was tighter in one project file, PLC, networking, HMI. Again, in my experience, I was responsible for pulling together the Rockwell programs, multiple ones from different engineering tool sets, the HMIs, the PILTS program, the SEW solution, the networking on Interbus. And there was these pieces of paper I had to use to map addresses or nodes to addresses to figure out what's going on there. Okay. I wanted something where I opened up the software and I got started. So the other thing that I learned when I was at the distributor, because I didn't know where I was going to go after the distributor, is I spent a lot more time discussing the highlights of why they're different and not necessarily getting into my perspective or opinion, what's better or worse, just, articulating to the customer that was evaluating, because most of us have both in our plants. And I think it's best if most of us embrace understanding both and have the capabilities of getting on there. So I enjoyed more having a dialogue where you could talk about the things that you're familiar with and the things that make sense for maintainability and long-term. For me, long-term, because I've been doing this for 30 years. I know a lot of other plants that have equipment that run for more than 30 years, right?
Yeah. And so I guess after that experience with the distributor, you made the decision. I guess there's a couple of points. I'll let you expand on that, but you made the decision ultimately to join Siemens. So I would be wondering what that path was like, in what capacity, I guess, first of all, did you join, and then how was that progression like?
Yeah. So fortunately, I joined the HMI team. Jay Coughlin, one of the top teams to join back in the time. But yeah, fortunately, I joined the HMI team, and HMI was an easy topic to kind of learn. What was cool about the HMI at that time is it had a lot of functionality that other HMIs didn't have, such as screen and screen and tag sharing. So I had a demo kit that I could pull the three of them together. So the first few years I traveled the region, just, talking HMIs. HMIs could talk to any PLC. They had drivers for the Allen Bradley PLCs. HMIs aren't so passionate with engineers that are so hard struck on, I got to have this flavor of PLC. They have a lot more struggles with the HMIs in those environments. So it was a good starting place, and the team was phenomenal to start with. Really learned a lot again, how to work inside Siemens. The cool part is I really got excited about their next generation of what software would be. So they had the Semantic Manager with the classic Step 7 that was not as user-friendly as what US Canadian people were used to. And some people started to show me the proof of concept, the pilot, the beta stuff that was planned for 2010 release. So we rolled into different business development roles and things in the region. And I happened to get word that the headquarters guys in Germany were looking for a usability management guy to help release, or after it was released, to make future adjustments. So I rolled over to Germany on a delegation to work with the Germans, the development guys, to see the light when it came to usability. Just kidding. To help, just to help provide a perspective of a user that is used to other tool sets.
What was that
So
experience like? I guess I'm very curious if you can expand on that a little bit. I guess going to Germany and like be an
that was
advisor to.
phenomenal.
Okay.
Yeah, it was phenomenal. First of all, many of the Germans appreciated the perspective. They really do appreciate the perspective because we all get blinders on to our solution, and sometimes it's helpful if we include somebody in our team that helps drive our perspective beyond what we're used to. And that's one of the things I learned in some of the discussions and meetings with some of the Germans is their perspective on what things were done on a manufacturing floor or with the automation tool set didn't necessarily line up with what traditionally we did in the manufacturing floor. Things such as forcing and modifying data blocks and some of the other things. But on the other hand, some of the other things I recognized was they do things a lot more thoroughly and logical. If you ever heard a German say "not logic," Nick Logis or whatever. Some of the things like monitoring the blocks. If you do a monitoring of a block inside the Siemens world, it's live, it's real, it's what is being run at that instance versus just an update of the tags from the software. The watch table, it's meticulously organized to provide a poke to the data at the beginning of the scan or at the end of the scan or redo it. So I saw a lot of things, and the safety integrated, the things that they did with the hardware. So I learned a lot about the significance of what they really do to ensure that the things are done right. And then what we got to do is help just drive the simplicity of the usability to ensure that it was easy to use without needing to reference a manual or a step-by-step. But it was a great experience. I did about 3 years. I was on my 4th year when other opportunities came up.
And so you came back to the US?
No, I actually got referred to by other colleagues to go to Australia. So I can hear my Australian accent a little bit and my dialect. I picked up a little bit of their slang. No, so the Australian market was looking to get a new PLC product manager for the launch of the 1500 in 2014. And they reached into the US and asked for some referrals. And my name got thrown out there that I was at the end of a delegation in Germany. I potentially would be interested. So yeah, I did 3 years in Germany and then rolled off to Australia to roam around in the outback with a bunch of hardware kids and try to promote and drive the awareness of the new stuff.
Interesting.
And then
what was that market like, if you don't mind me asking? Because I guess I'm familiar with North America, Europe, but Australia, is that any different? Did you see like different things? Is it a mix of various platforms?
Yeah, it's a mix. It's a mix of different vendors. It's very spread out. Very, very spread out, a long distance. There's a lot of dairy and food and beverage and stuff like that. But it's hard to get. It's 4 to 6 hours to get to a site, so you need a lot more regional folks to support it. But it was fun. It was a great experience. Tasmania, New Zealand, they were all part of our region. So I got to work with all the guys there and basically try new things to try and bring in the new product. But after 5 years, I found an opportunity here to come back as the TI Portal guy. 2016 or 17, I came back and I've been part of this digitalization, digital journey solution, the future with the team here in Georgia for the last 4 years. So it's been a great little tour of duty around the world, around the different vendors and products and solutions.
It's I guess like on a slight side note, it's awesome to hear that automation often provides those opportunities, unlike many other, I feel like, electrical or just general engineering professions. I think like if you find the right opportunities, then you can again like build your career. If you want to travel somewhere else, like it's I think like that's a huge advantage for sure. But no,
Yeah.
Dave, do you want to follow up on anything? I think it's a
Yeah.
long
So
introduction, but
I mean, it is a long introduction, but as John was describing his background, looking at the theme, emerging technologies, I realized that John's entire career has been emerging technologies, from
Yeah.
relay logic to the PLC fives to through the slicks and the controllers that we're now using through Siemens, and kind of the build of the entirety of what we now know as TIA Portal. I think that that's amazing. Before we talk about some emerging technologies that you're excited with, John, do you have any like sage words of wisdom, of maybe things that you've realized through the years when you look at new technologies and decide which directions to go in?
Yeah. I think fortunately for me, my persona, my attitude is I embraced it. I wanted to learn it. I wanted to see what it was what it was capable of. Give me a trial. Let me play with it. Um, the other thing is a lot of people take a naysaying attitude against it. The PLC, the safety integrated, the Ethernet on the network floor, the wireless safety
Ooh,
technology, right?
very
hot
good
button
They,
commercial
topic right
topic.
there.
Yes.
A hot button topic.
yeah. In all my career, what I've seen over and over again is people say, no, not going to happen. It's not going to work. Um, HMIs, when we did it, we had to put it next to the control panel because the operator was not going to be able to turn pages, versus seeing all the push buttons on the cabinet. Um, Honestly, it all evolves to be, first of all, the innovations, then technology evolved to be stable, secure, and highly functional. Safety integrated. I saw relay panels fail. I saw the relay be taken out of the cabinet and the safety was still running. And to me, my argument is, or my recommendation to people is, recognize that these emergent technologies are going to evolve and they are going to be part of the playing field. And the sooner you get on board with it and figure out how it integrates into your team or your facility or your machines is important, because otherwise you're going to lag behind the rest of them. You don't want to still be doing relay, ladder logic when the rest of us are on fourth generation PLCs. So absolutely, the one thing I say is, recognize that the technology will evolve and find a way to embrace it and understand it and learn it and build it in. It's worth the investment.
I like that, John. And so in the beginning of your career, some of the first plants you were talking about, you were going and installing, PLC fives, which
Correct.
many of them are probably still running, but we're probably looking at we are forced to upgrade in the very near future because there are literally no parts left, long since obsolete. Would you suggest that the people look to get as far ahead in the next generation of controllers as they possibly can?
You know, I don't know. I would definitely find a way to do that. Like you said, the one of the systems they're still running, and it's kind of amazing when you look at, even when I was doing the retrofits, to look back and know that some of these control panels were from the 1930s and still running the parts of the plant. It was amazing. But you still have to be slow to adopt it into production, because you don't want to take a risk that you're struggling with being able to evolve with that solution. So I think there's places where you're going to have to play a little bit safe, but you're going to look at places where you can embed that. I did it in one of the automotives. I was like, hey, for all the main lines, I would suggest sticking with what you're familiar with, but start to evolve on this other line that's not so critical, the new technology as a test or a pilot bed, so that you could actually ramp up your understanding of what works. Because it sure is a lot easier to evolve a new solution within the plant with the people that are going to run it and ensure that it's supported, than it is to wait till the last minute and blow it in there really complicated.
Yeah. No, I like that, John. I think that's a good recommendation. And so as we were talking before the show about some interesting emerging technologies, one of those things that I think fits in very well is edge applications, right? So edge devices and edge applications to help kind of move the technology forward. Can you talk a little bit about why you're excited about that and maybe some applications as to what you see people using it on?
Yeah, I do. So for years, like I mentioned before, that we did the PLC process, we did the HMI, and then we always tended to fund a little middleware SCADA system to kind of pull together something that we needed additionally to the PLC, whether it be the revision tracking of the part numbers or the block identifications or version control, or quality data or production data or drive data. When I started to look at the concept of an app, similar to what we do with our devices 4 or 5 years ago, and getting the perspective of the ability to bolt on an app that was provided by somebody that does a solution, such as managing or identifying the firmware revisions, the catalog numbers of the install base, and publishing that up to something. To me, if it's part of an app, it's part of an ecosystem that exists on the bolt-on of the PLC, the HMI, the switch, or the network, then I feel like it's something that it's easier to maintain long-term, because I'm not dependent on a programmer that programmed it to his flavor and nobody else can ever support it. The concept of an app with a functionality that I can bolt onto my PLC, it pulls the data, then I'm not reprogramming it. And I believe, the concept that these app developers or these app providers, there's a variety of different ways this is going to evolve, whether there's tool sets that provide the sample and anybody can develop their own personal apps or corporate apps or OEM apps, or whether a vendor like SEW or Siemens provides an app associated with their controllers and you link it and tie it to other apps. I really believe that the concept of an edge ecosystem that supports the update, the security, and the management and the subscription is going to be part of it, and the updates of it over time. I believe that that's going to be a great add-on to the automation-centric system. And going into that, the other thing that I think is key is that we simplify the automation system, so that we're like we do with TI Portal. You have one automation system for micro, distributed, advanced, complex, HMI, networking, IO. One simple user interface that's consistent, that does things for me, like system diagnostics and process diagnostics and that kind of stuff. And then it's simpler for me to bolt on these edge technologies onto all my systems, whether it's a simple conveyor, a tank, or it's my complex extruder that might exist in the plant.
I think we still have a bit of time before that vision comes to life, but I think we're definitely headed in that direction. I mean, I really hope that there's going to be a lot more of interconnection of technology, and I think Siemens has an initiative. What was, Dave? You had mentioned it last time that we spoke. That allows MindSphere. That's right. That allows like other vendors to essentially come in and use some of the APIs to access, again, like certain data, either to like talk to the device or push data into the device. And I think again, like I think we're gonna see more and more of that, because I think again there's so many different solutions which may be applicable in certain instances, depending on the industry, depending on the maturity of the plant, for example, that will make sense. And so, as you were saying, they could be pulled as almost applications depending on your specific case. But I think we're heading there, but it's gonna take some time.
Yeah, and
to that point, you can start today. That's what I think is significant. You could start with an edge-enabled device such as the unified panel and do a simple app and say, hey, we're doing it. MindSphere. Again, I suggest to many customers I would get started with it if I was in that industry, just to see what things I need to make sure that my infrastructure requires.
Absolutely. And kind of to that point, I first, kind of came across this 5, 6, 7 years ago, and I wasn't as bullish as I am now on it. But looking through and the opportunity to develop, whether you're an OEM and you just want to build your apps as an app like a MindSphere, or you want to put it as a module and just drop it into all of the same systems, I think for repeatability and ease of use reasons, there's the only reason not to do it is because you don't have the technical ability in-house to do it, and you don't know how to go through the SDK and figure out what all of that looks like. And if you don't know how to do that, you need to go find the talent in order to help you bring that to be able to go leverage these into the future. Because for many programmers who are rewriting custom code the last 20% over and over and over for every application, to John's very beginning of his career point, that is not sustainable in this industry, because now you have every machine running custom code. If we could remove the customization of it and get all of that into a module or an app, now then that could be something as simple as an edge app, or that could be, entire control systems and CMMSs and kind of all of those things. That, in my opinion, is one of the ways that we have to go in order to move this industry further. We have to get away from the everyone writes custom code for everything and get to the we have solutions. Let's deliver these solutions. And if we can solve 90% of it, then the extra 10% is edge case and is custom code. And that is what we've seen most of the rest of the software world. They've been doing it for 20 or more years.
Yep.
But
yeah, I fully agree. Yeah, 100%.
Absolutely. So that's one of the reasons that I've been very interested to watch kind of the movement of MindSphere. So I think that was the first one that kind of came into light for me, and kind of following it along its path has been very interesting. I would say I'm happy to where it is. I think it'll grow. It was probably a little early before its time. It was a very early emerging technology, and of course the logical German engineers over in Germany knew the direction that we needed to go maybe before we did. But I want to pause this. We've got some more emerging technologies to talk about, but we do want to thank Siemens as our sponsor. So Vlad, can you give me that awkward laugh, because we still don't have a sponsor ad read sound? Thank you. So as we said, we want to thank Siemens for sponsoring this theme. And as part of that, we want to talk about 25 years of totally integrated automation. Now, this may sound exactly what John was talking about, because John has lived through 25 years plus of totally integrated automation. But I think it's very interesting. So 25 years ago, Siemens established end-to-end communication. They integrated the engineering and data management into the factory for the first time. Today, TIA enables a smart link between the production environments of the OT side and the office environment, the IT side of manufacturing industrial enterprises. Siemens is working with and for our customers to drive efficiency and productivity today and in the future. As they say, 25 years of TIA, and the beat goes on. So you guys can find all of that information at siemens.com/TIA. And this week we'll share a couple of interesting things. So I know Vlad on Solus PLC has done some very interesting work on Siemens. I don't know how deep you guys have gotten into Siemens TIA portal, but we would like to shout out another great member of the community. So G, you may know them as Gina Brooks on LinkedIn and Outlier Automation. They've been doing a bunch of very interesting things that I've seen. So we talked about DevOps in earlier themes. So how Siemens can kind of pull in and connect with a Git repository. They're great videos. If you guys haven't seen Outlier Automation, you guys should absolutely go through and check that out. Vlad, any thoughts with that?
Well, I was gonna say, I believe there's a webinar as well coming up with Gina. I don't know if John, if you want to share a bit more information, would be more than happy to put up the link and see if people would have an interest in that. What's the webinar about, and when is it happening?
Yeah, so tomorrow, actually, we're doing a test suite test suite overview of the ability to run style guides and run an application to test against your TI portal project. So tomorrow at 2 o'clock Eastern Standard Time, we're gonna promote our or walk through a demo with Outlier. They did some. I just put the link in the chat for the Knowledge Hub where we've landed your videos together with some of her videos. How to kind of a landing page to go find that, and then I'll grab that other link and drop it in the thing for tomorrow to register for that other one. The interesting thing is we're potentially going to offer a giveaway of the test suite software based on the attendees that attend that workshop as well.
Very interesting. So John is going to go ahead and drop that in the link. If you guys are watching this live, you guys can check that link out tomorrow. If not, I would imagine you guys can go and rewatch all of that through the same link as signing up for the webinar. John is giving perfect. John is giving me a yes, so that will be in the show notes. So if you're listening to the podcast or any other time that is not that is before December 2nd in the afternoon East Coast time, go ahead and click that link and you guys can watch that. And John kind of gave us a fantastic segue to the first manufacturing hub giveaway. So as we mentioned earlier in the intro comments, we're very pleased to kind of go help give back and give more stuff to this fantastic community. So we have a trio of Siemens somatic software that we're going to go ahead and give away. You guys can go check that out at manufacturinghub.live/Siemens-giveaway, and that link should be in the comments of all of this or in the show notes if you're listening to it either. It will run for about a month. We'll have firm dates. We'll have firm dates on that. I think Vlad and I are going to draw it live either at the end of this year on our last show or at the beginning of next year on the first show of the year. And so go ahead and check all of that out. We will make the note that you do have to have a U.S. or Canadian shipping residence to get that, even though we are delivering it via email. So guys, please go ahead and check that out. Vlad and I are excited about that, and you guys will absolutely get more of that information as the month of December rolls on. Vlad, do you have any other thoughts on that?
No, I think, again, you covered it really well, Dave. I just want to maybe resume our conversation a little bit around, emerging technologies as that's the theme of the month. But maybe, again, like jump into some further, in a decade or several decades, John, what do you see as, taking over? Is it AI, machine learning? Is it going to be drones? In manufacturing facilities, there's some tests going on. Believe it or not, those are conversations of moving materials around. But no, what are your thoughts on what's going to be interesting?
Yeah. So as it was mentioned last week with your guest last week, Jeff Winter, I think. Yep. Mm-hmm. I do see AI coming in more and more, like he mentioned, inherently within the product and that kind of stuff, and playing a part of the solution. But another thing that I think that is going to matter, like I mentioned before, is working on the floor with the mechanical engineer and vetting the mechanics against the automation, is the fact that the machine design tools for the CAD systems and the 3D modeling that is done for the mechanical process and the timing diagrams that's laid out in those environments, I believe a tighter connection of virtual commissioning, being able to vet some of the automation program against some of the mechanical design ahead of time in the virtual commissioning, so that you work through some of those things before you get to the point of build the machine and now let's fix the automation to the problems that we find mechanically. So I think that's another thing that's kind of interesting is the ability to kind of link those two together, so that you have the representation of a digital twin of the machine together with a digital twin of the automation.
I think that's an interesting, I guess, I'm curious to see how, well, I guess two sides, right? There's the digital twin technology, and there's the simulation that becomes a lot better integrated with the current tools, because again, there are simulation software and tools that you can use right now with your PLCs and HMIs, but they're not necessarily representative maybe of the process that's running, which is very difficult to simulate because, as you said, you're running a mechanical transformation or even a chemical one, so it's hard to get those like inputs as you would. But no, I mean, I'm curious to see, and I know there's a lot of work being done by different companies, right, from small to large, in that space. But I personally have not seen maybe a digital twin implementation yet that was perhaps the good of like good enough of an investment to say that yes, like this has been like proven and successful. I don't know if you have any like stories or experiences that you can share around that.
Yeah, if you Google it on YouTube, Burr Oak out of Michigan, I think they're pretty vocal on what they've used. And then there's another one out of Germany uh, that I can get you the link, but they talk through. It's a pretty powerful thing on virtual commissioning. It was a packaging OEM. I can't remember the name of it, but um, they really talk through the concept of the fact that they got to vet their mechanical design against some of the automation before they ever built the machine. And the other thing that's key is they can try different scenarios of the design against the concept of, will this work, or will this work, or will this give the production? The cool thing is it's another one of those things is once you do it, it evolves over time. And some of the things that evolve out of it is a performance digital twin, where you actually tie the data coming out of the real running mechanical machine back to the design environment, so you get a true feedback of whether it worked or not. And I think that's where some of the real value comes in, and is instead of manual carrying the problems that existed on the production floor back to the mechanical design guys or the automation design guys, is linking that whole cycle of tool sets so that you've got the complete digital model. And like you said, it's impossible to model everything at the beginning, because there's certain things that are harder to model in software: the drive, the mechanics, the motor. But the tool sets are really getting a lot more powerful.
And that's a good point. That's a very good point, that it's going to evolve with the data that comes in, right? Like I guess it's not a single piece of technology, but it will learn as you're implementing solutions that will pull the data of their utilization. That goes back to even the discussion we had on standardizing across different equipment, right? Because at that point, your motor, your servo drive, your HMI, whatever that runs in one facility has a similar structure in a different one, and you can automatically pull that in and then be able to predict with a higher accuracy what your let's say digital twin or model will look like. So that's actually a really good I guess connection between the different technologies.
Absolutely. And kind of to that digital twin comment, I'll shout out one company I know who's been doing a bunch of work in it. The company's name is Simwell. I think they're based out of Quebec originally, and they've also got a location in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. I've had a couple of conversations with them, and it's been amazing to follow their fairly explosive growth over the last 3 or 4 years, almost exclusively in simulation and digital twin. And so it's been very interesting, because before that, most of my comments were very similar to yours, Vlad, of I haven't seen a lot of it work. And you'd think it's a lot more expensive than it actually is. It seems to be, based upon a couple of price points that I've looked at, much less expensive. Like, it's not hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars to simulate a facility. But I do want to bring kind of John's comment back to something that seems exceptionally futuristic, but I know something that you're very interested in, the things that are happening like now today. And that's the digital thread in virtual commissioning. We're going to give it a little bit of a spoiler. We're working to get some folks on to talk about virtual commissioning and digital thread. But can you give us just a little bit of a teaser of what virtual commissioning and digital thread is in a lead up for that, John?
So yeah, to me, the virtual commissioning is a definition of, digital twin and simulation is, a digital twin of the machine, the mechanics, represented virtually running instead of just design running. A digital twin of the automation is, instead of having the hardware on my desk, I run it in a simulation and toggle the bits. But to me, virtual commissioning represents the fact I can tie those two worlds together. And where the mechanical twin is looking for an input to command it to run and run the cycle, it's tied and mapped to the automation twin. And then, like Vlad mentioned, sometimes there's things that can't be represented in the mechanical design or the automation design, like the drive and process and some of the other things. And that's when you use another tool called Simit. And Simit has for example, Siemens simulation tool has a whole suite of add-ons for process, drives, and all these other things. So there's a whole bunch of other tools. And like you mentioned, there's a whole suite of companies and programmers out there that are getting involved in these things. I've seen a lot of different other digital twins of things, operators, and more and more things are pulled together where they're able to basically simulate the whole thing, and they're just tying the things together by open communications. The APIs, the OPC UA, whatever provides the fastest means of communication. And that's, our objective is to bring one of the guys on there that can really paint the bigger picture and talk about some of the real references that have been successful in doing it. But like I mentioned, when I first started 30 years ago, or more 33 years ago, actually, 33 years ago, 1988. My success in automation was working with the mechanical guy enlightening me to what I was controlling and what I needed to understand with the mechanics, and working together. And I think that we need to recognize that there's a big value in those guys working together in that realm. So, and the digital thread is just basically the fact that I think some of the information that might exist in one tool is feeding the automatic generation of the other tools, like the electrical E-plan. When you design the architecture of the part numbers of the devices, the name of the devices, the network structure, the inputs, the addresses, the tags, you can import that all in with automation ML into from E-plan, the electrical drawing package, into the architecture of the automation solution. And that's not a Siemens thing. That's an open vendor. There's a whole bunch of other providers that are jumping on the bandwagon with that automation ML solution. And then the other concept is just the data. Once the data flows from up to the cloud and feeds back, that's kind of the digital thread that ties everything together. I mean, it used to be SneakerNet. You'd sit there and feed back things that were going on in the plant back from my project that I launched in Warren, Michigan. I took it back to Troy, Michigan, and said, "Hey, this is what's wrong with our automation solution. Fix it before you go to Sterling Heights or Dearborn or whatever." It was all dependent on me being interested to encourage success for the next project. So I think those things are what's changing, is the fact now I get the data back through the process.
Yeah, I love that. I think the future is now. And I think we should all be excited about the things that we're seeing today and in the next 5 years. With that, I want what I'm calling slow rapid fire questions. So John, we've got a couple of questions for you as we wrap up. Everyone loves our hashtag not sponsored Audible bit, in which I ask you for a book review and Vlad goes and purchases the book on his Audible account. Do you have a book recommendation for us?
Yeah. So in all my time that I've been embedded in situations with Alan Bradley and startups and manufacturing and processes, we've all been there trying to commission a rebuild of a 1336 200 horsepower drive, or commissioning the control net, and at 11 o'clock at night praying for the possibility that it's going to work when we turn on the power. One of the books that I found inspiring was The Shack by Paul Young, just a book that kind of touches me into an understanding, inspirational type book. So that's one I've read a couple times, over the last couple of years. So that's one thing that I've read.
Oh no, perfect. Thank you. Second question for you is: you've got a vast array of knowledge. Who do you want to talk to? Who can help you? Who do you want to help?
I like enlightening the folks to understanding, the perspective of, what's part of the automation solution, where it's evolved, why it's evolved. I love participating in just the discussions of what are the next steps, what technology should we embrace, how should we embrace it. I think one of the funnest things, the most enlightening things, was a slow, careful approach in evolving over time. What makes sense over time. So yeah, and I'm approachable. I'm on LinkedIn. Generally, we connect with anybody, and we're open to just have those open dialogues about what was, why one is more valuable than the other, what were some of the experiences, and then what things matter, or what my perspective of it is, why things matter going forward in the future. But like you said, I think the future is now, and it's exciting.
Oh, perfect. Thank you. Thank you, John. And then last question is, do you have a piece of career advice, either for early career or middle career people within automation?
First of all, in college, university, high school, get involved in an internship and get experience. Secondly is, recognize that everybody can help you if they recognize your value over time. So make relationships. Everything that I've done over time has been based on people knowing who I was and what I was capable of, and being able to, refer me and recommend me for other opportunities, and push me to the next step, and take advantage of the opportunities. Some people, while I was making the transitions, made comments like, how can you make that step? How can you make that risk or take that chance? But the things about, changing from one company to the other, taking a little transition in the middle. I even did a point where I resigned from a company and took the summer off. It was kind of a risky situation, but it worked out really well. And then the other thing is, really embrace the opportunities, like the opportunity to go overseas and experience, the perspective of another culture. Because the one thing that's significant is they do truly appreciate the American go get it perspective, and do it and try. And the fact that we're not afraid to fail, and the opportunity to discover what works. So yeah, put yourself out there, have good relationships, and embrace the opportunities. Because it's just it's a fun thing, especially right now. There's so many.
That's great advice. That's great advice. I like.
No, it is great advice. No, thank you so much, John. Thank you, everyone. Again, everyone, this has been episode 39 of the Manufacturing Hub podcast with me, Dave, and this guy over here, Vlad. Thank you, John, DeTellem, for talking about, the last 30 plus years of emerging technologies and where we're going and how we're here. If you guys want to check us out, all of our links will be in the show notes, as well as in the video notes. Please feel free to catch us almost every Wednesday evening as we're streaming the show live or in podcast form. And if you're listening from one of these platforms, please feel free to give us the thumbs up and rate us 5 stars and reviews, and connect with us on LinkedIn and all of those other things. Until next week, we'll see you guys soon. Thanks.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, John. Really appreciate it.
Thank you so much. Ciao.